This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon, this is The Bigger Picture. I'm Lee Choi Lin. High electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, given out by mobile phones, Wi-Fi distributors, and other portable electronic items are claimed to be the cause of a self-diagnosed medical condition known as electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS. About 3 to 8% of the world's population are believed to be suffering from it, while many scientists and medical practitioners consider it a myth. Today I'm sitting down with Professor Kwan Hoong, medical physicist and professor at the Department of Biomedical Imaging in University of Malaya, to find out more about the reality of electromagnetic hypersensitivity and whether it is fact or fiction. Professor Ng, how much electromagnetic waves are we really exposed to in day-to-day living?
Well, actually, we have been exposed to that in every second of our life. For example, the electromagnetic wave from the radio television station, from Astro, even from various electrical devices, from television, from the household gadgets. So all those emit electromagnetic wave.
And what are some of the ways to detect this electromagnetic fields?
It's something very interesting. Our human bodies could detect a lot of things. Like, for example, the eyes could detect the light, the body can feel the pain, the pressure. We cannot detect the higher frequency electromagnetic waves such as the radio wave and so on. So we rely on instruments such as all this detector to detect the presence of the radio wave and so on.
How did you personally get involved with the study of EMF?
Well, one of my research areas is into biological effects of radiation. I study the health consequences when we are exposed to radiation, such as X-ray. I work in a department where we use X-ray for CT scan, for example. So I study how it affects the body, our cells, our children, and so on. And then I was involved in WHO, in the many EMF study, and also became a member of the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation, the ICNRP, as a consultant expert. And also, it's quite privileged to be involved in the Malaysian Multimedia and Communication Commission for the last 10 years or so, advising them on these aspects.
What have you found about the effects of radiation on the body? I mean, we're going to be talking about electromagnetic fields after this, but just briefly?
This area of the electromagnetic field effects on body has been studied for more than 50 years, right? Since radio, television, and also radar, not forgetting using radio wave. The influence on the body is really dependent on its frequency and its intensity, or this is power. And the only thing we know well, for example, very high power is called thermal or heat effect. Note example is microwave oven. We use it to cook, right? There's a very high power to give out the microwave to heat up. Okay? When it comes to a lower level of power, there isn't any conclusive evidence showing that there is any adverse health effects on the human body. But there are a lot of theories being proposed. There are a lot of studies still being going on.
What are the thermal effects of electromagnetic fields on the body? I think you mentioned there that when it's very powerful, it may have some effects. What are those effects?
The main one is the most well-studied is called thermal effect. There's a heating effect, and it will basically heat up and causes damage to the cells.
How real are the dangers of electromagnetic fields?
The word danger is rather frightening, but a lot of these are perceived danger, or we call it, what we prefer to call is the risk. There are a lot of studies from the WHO reports, there are a lot of workshops conducted, and there are guidelines and regulatory bodies set up limits. For example, the ICNIRP, they set different exposure limits for different categories of people, adults, children, for different frequency, which is these are below that limit, then we are so-called relatively safe, and no adverse effects affecting our health.
How might some of these EMFs affect us on a cellular level?
The cellular studies there have been studies look at how it changes its reproduction, or changes in the cell cycles, or release of certain biochemical agents and so on. Now, there are biological effects, just like when we are exposed to sunlight, for example, it causes some chemical reaction, right? We need sunlight, the UV, for a healthy bone formation, but we're exposed to sunlight much longer, right? We sweat. These are normal, we call it physiological response, but much longer, right? We get a skin burn, right? We might faint and we're going to die of heat stroke. Okay? So there's a difference between the biological effects and health hazard. So far we study there be some changes in cellular, the behavior, biochemical reaction, but those don't necessarily lead to any adverse effect, meaning leading to cancerous cell, for example.
On the other side of that, though, is there any proven correlation between exposure to magnetic fields and site-specific cancers, such as leukemia, for example?
Not really, but there's some studies on the lower frequency. There's a power line. They also, this is 50 hertz. We see the pylons, a power line. They found some clusters of leukemia among children, those who live around those transmission of the power lines. But the statistical significance is not that strong enough to prove the correlation is definite. However, there are many studies are still ongoing to show. These are all epidemiological studies. Will take a long time to have some conclusive evidence.
You mentioned there that there hasn't been much studies really done on the lower range of electromagnetic fields. But so what are the limits of healthy exposure to EMF?
So far, the ICNIP, right, they do have different exposure limits frequency. Many countries have adopted those. For example, in Malaysia, we are pretty so-called safe as the measurement of, say, the radio wave, the RF from mobile phone transmission tower is well below, at least 1,000 times, even lower than what is regarded as the so-called the safe limit.
Are there some reasons that some people may be more sensitive to electromagnetic fields than others?
That is a very contentious issue. I think probably leading to this condition called electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Yeah, that is this condition is called the electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS. It is the medically unexplained illness in which the subjective symptoms are reported by the persons who suffer from that when they're exposed to electromagnetic wave or exposed to electrical devices. But these symptoms are non-specific. It could be related to, say, dermatological, like skin redness, the tingling sensation, burning sensation. The other related more neuroanesthesias, for example, they feel tired, fatigue, dizzy or nausea, palpitation of heart. Okay? So this is the fairly controversial medical condition.
I'm speaking today to Professor Kwan Hoong, who is a medical physicist, and we're talking about electromagnetic fields and electromagnetic hypersensitivity. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing more about the condition and whether or not there's any proof one way or the next. You're listening to The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
This is a download from BFM 89.9. The business station.
Hello, this is The Bigger Picture. I'm Lee Choi Lin, joined today by Professor Kwan Hoong, who is a medical physicist, and we're talking about electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Professor Ng, before we took the break, you described what EHS, as it's known, may cause to people, such as, its symptoms and so on. What is your personal opinion regarding this self-diagnosed condition?
Well, my opinion, it is a real medical condition. We just can't ignore it. Though I mentioned earlier, it's controversial. A lot of people, a lot of medical community, they just don't recognize such condition.
As you point out, it's been a contentious issue. Is there any indication of accurate or supportive research of the truth of the condition?
Most people, when this is a self-diagnosed condition, you need to understand, earlier I mentioned symptoms. There are two things, symptoms and sign. Right? Symptoms are subjective, such as, I have stomach ache, I have pain, I feel tired. These are symptoms. Whereas signs are more objective, such as blood in a stool or a blister in our skin. Right? But all these are a symptom, very subjective, and they cannot be proven. So some will attribute this to psychosomatic disorder, where they see the presence of a mobile phone or transmission tower, then they start feeling, I have giddy, I feel nausea. And there is I like to point out, there are a lot of stories going around in the new media. Most of them are bad signs, but there's a very authoritative study. It's a systematic review of provocation studies published by Rubin et al. They are from the King's College in London, just 2009. They look at 46 blinded study. These are provocation studies where 1,175 the EHS volunteers, right, those who claim they suffer from this sensitivity. So they study under controlled conditions and put them in a room, and they wouldn't know whether they're exposed to RF, the radio wave, or not. So there's no evidence to support theory, right? So their symptoms are unrelated to this EMF. And also those who claim, right, when they're exposed to EMF, they have all these symptoms, but they couldn't replicate those under controlled conditions. So that was the most authoritative systematic review to show that we cannot find there is a cause and effect. We cannot say that the EMF causes all this hypersensitivity. So it could be from other factors. So scientists suspect it could be from the environment, from the stress in work, air quality, and so on.
And in order to conclusively test for EHS, what kinds of experiments or tests would need to be run? I think you just described one there, but that's more about proving that symptoms can't be replicated. But if you were trying to test somebody for this condition, what would you have any idea what to do?
Basically, that was the current methodology. It also something is called nocebo effect. Interesting, nocebo. We know about placebo effect, right? The nocebo is the other one, which is a Latin word, means like cause harm. So it is a very psychological phenomenon where the person is well, but he claimed that he has suffered from this disorder. When you see something associated, when I'm near computer or Wi-Fi or a mobile phone or transmission tower, then they start to exhibit such kind of symptoms, right? Skin turns red, tingling sensation, all those. So again, as I mentioned, they are very subjective. We can't really prove it, except look at the sign. For example, we can measure, say, analyze the blood or urine and others. But many of those studies just show that they are no different from one who doesn't suffer from such a disorder.
So what I'm hearing from you right now is that you believe that this is a medical condition, a real medical condition, but there seems to be no proof stating that it really is one. Is that accurate?
Yes. Now, until today, right, only a few countries in Scandinavia, they recognize such medical conditions. The Scandinavian countries, they do, but the others, they don't. But there is a real need to really understand this. And so much so that there is a new name, a better name to describe this condition. It's called idiopathic environmental intolerance attributed to EMF. Long name.
Very long name.
Yeah. Now, idiopathic means unknown origin, right? It's environmental, so environmental factor, not only from radio wave, could be ultraviolet, air quality, right? The environment, right? It's intolerance because the person who suffers is not tolerant to all kinds of things. So that might be a better way to describe it.
Okay. In your experience or based on these studies, is there any way for an individual who claims to be suffering from EHS to be able to differentiate the symptoms of that disorder with other medical conditions? Or is it just indistinguishable?
Yeah, so far it's indistinguishable. So what would be the best? And some of the medical doctors, they try to treat the symptoms. Right? They have say redness of skin, they just like to reduce that, but to find out the cause to remove that, it's just not possible now.
As you pointed out at the start of our interview, almost every electronic device would give out EMF of some sort. We're surrounded by it all the time. So what makes EMF given out by certain devices such as handphones or microwaves more dangerous than other forms of EMF? I think microwaves, you mentioned that it's related to thermal energy.
It depends on the power or the intensity, right? For example, microwave is higher power used for cooking, right? A microwave oven, and also microwave for communication, radar, right? But for the communication, the power level is much lower. Therefore, right, the thermal effect is not that obvious, it's not that evident.
In modern times, why do you think there's such a rise in the number of individuals who claim to be experiencing EHS?
Could be due to several factors, and one is the awareness through the new media, right? People read about in blogs and websites. A lot have been publicized, but a lot also are the urban myth, what we call is the bad science. They just go around and around. And another thing is definitely we see that radio wave being used more and more. Right? We have everywhere we go, in the restaurants, schools, you have Wi-Fi, right? You have more transmission towers being built, to be more. So somehow in our mind we think there must be a correlation. Now, I give you an example, right? It's happened in London. Interesting that they found there's a so-called correlation between the number of towers and the newborns. It's more babies born. And it's quite interesting. It's reported in the Times, but that is not a real correlation. What happened is that in big cities like in London, right, it's a population growth and people will use mobile phone. It is a mass communicator too now. So to support all those increase, you need more transmission tower base stations, right? So there are more, and then same time, to increase in population, people move to city, they get married, they have children. So in fact, they find the curve interesting. They find the rise in newborn and correlate very well with increased number of towers, but that is not the real reason, right? So that shows that there is not a scientific correlation between that this increased people report about this EHS and the increased usage of the mobile phone or RF towers.
Diseases such as AIDS took a long time to be considered a proper medical condition, and then even longer for us to understand what we understand about AIDS today. Do you think EHS might also prove to be one of those diseases that are ignored initially, or people have a completely wrong impression of it, but later become recognized as a serious medical condition?
Yeah, it might be, right? As I said, now only a few countries in Scandinavia, they recognize a medical condition, they will be treated, they can claim insurance, but many countries is still recognized by the medical community, by the insurance company. It may be, I would think that we should look at it in a much more serious way to all those people who suffer from such condition.
How long do you think it will take for this condition to be recognized as something that's here to stay?
It all depends on the emphasis given by the medical professions, the government, NGOs, right? If they are serious, they can point more funding for research, right? Then we probably can find some answer sooner than what is expected.
On the flip side of all of this, do you think that there's a chance that this is all just fear-mongering and, this condition is not as serious as it sounds?
It may not be. I think probably the different statistics, some put it as about 10% of the population in the world suffer from this, right? Could be over-exaggerated, but some really do suffer from that. Okay? We need to consider that very seriously on how to address this, how to treat them. Okay? But unless we have put more emphasis, more research funding to study this condition will remain. At the same time, because of all this new media, the influence, and those people suffer who can't get any attention, no help, and this will be exaggerated and go around, and the fear-mongering will also increase at the same time.
Do you think more research is needed and should be conducted to learn more about EHS?
Yes, definitely. Okay, and also not only that, the correct information must be communicated to the public. Right now, there isn't. The government authority doesn't issue any official statements or white paper to address this issue. What we know is a lot through the media.
And are there any ways that people can lessen their exposure to electromagnetic fields?
We can't avoid that. It's so pervasive today anywhere we go, right? And we expect more and more. Right? Everywhere they set up Wi-Fi, even in our own homes everywhere. But I know that in two countries, in France and Italy, they have some kind of sanctuary, some in the countryside, and they just stay there. They build a special metallic containers, right? They stay there. It's quite miserable life they lead, quality, but if they feel they're happy staying there, so
they might feel safer.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
All right, so what's your final takeaway message on the subject of electromagnetic hypersensitivity and electromagnetic field exposure?
Yeah, my opinion is that the public should be given the correct information. A lot of awareness to be done by the governments and health authorities. And same time, much more research has to put into this to look into this particular medical condition.
Thank you, Professor Ng. I've been speaking to Professor Kwan Hoong, a medical physicist, and we've been discussing electromagnetic hypersensitivity on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.